The second awardee for our first inaugural Freedom Fighter Awards dinner is a man who doesn't need a whole lot of introduction, a man of letters, and before that, a man who stood tall in the federal criminal justice system, Andrew McCarthy. I'm going to allow Judge Mukasey to introduce him. And while Judge Mukasey also does not need much of an introduction, I will take a minute to just highlight a few of his accomplishments. And I assume he will make the nexus between his introduction of Mr. McCarthy himself. Judge Mukasey served as the 81st Attorney General of the United States from November 2007 to January 2009. He oversaw all activities of the Justice Department and advised on critical issues of domestic international law. From 1988 to 2006, he served as a district judge in the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York, that I might say rather biasedly is the most important district of them all, becoming Chief Judge in 2000. While on the bench, he handled numerous cases, including, underscore, the trial of Omar Abdelrahman, the so-called blind sheikh, and 9 co-defendants convicted of a wide-ranging conspiracy that included the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center and a latter plot to blow up New York landmarks, including the Holland and Lincoln tunnels, the United Nations, and the FBI's new headquarters in Lower Manhattan. No further ado, Judge Mukasey.
Thanks, David, for that very kind introduction. You should all envy me because I am probably the person in this room who's been the beneficiary of Andy McCarthy's talents and abilities for longer than anybody else here. When he was a prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, in the case that you just heard about, United States versus Omar Abdelrahman and others, in which I was the trial judge, as the case kind of wended its way from the filing of the indictment in the summer of 1993 to an eventual trial in 1995, the parties were regularly before me with the usual pretrial pushing and shoving that lawyers engage in. And whenever it was necessary for the government to put its position in writing, I could always look forward to either a memo or a letter from Andy, often landing in my inbox the day after the issue was raised in court. And there were several lawyers on the government team, but it was always Andy's name that appeared at the end of the government's submission. I should tell you that he need not have signed any of those memos or letters because it was clear that the prose, clear, devoid of legalisms, made it obvious that who the author was. And it wasn't only the style and the content of those submissions that made them so remarkable, but also that they arrived so soon after the issue had been initially raised. After he helped launch the investigation into the September 11, 2001 attacks, Andy left the U.S. Attorney's Office and began essentially a second career. Andy's second career has been as a writer whose particular mission has been to bring to the attention of a lay audience some of the gravest dangers that face this country, starting with the Islamism that manifested itself in the cases that he prosecuted, but including also lawless overreach by our own government, principally but not exclusively in the person of the president. He has produced 4 remarkable books: Willful Blindness, a description not only of the Abdelrahman case, but also of the mindset that pervaded this country before 9/11, followed by a detailed exploration of the phenomenon of Islamism in a book called The Grand Jihad, and a clear-eyed description of what underlay what became known in the West as the Arab Spring in a devastating volume called Spring Fever. Most recently, he has produced a layman's guide to the principles that underlie the rarely used remedy of impeachment, along with a detailed description of how President Obama's conduct in office qualifies him admirably for impeachment, but accompanied also by a cautionary discussion of why it's unlikely to happen, because impeachment is essentially a political rather than a legal remedy. All of that, while turning out columns and other pieces for the National Review Online and other platforms on topics across the range of human folly, pausing only for the occasional upbeat column on baseball. Andy's achievements as a government prosecutor, his books, his columns, any of those, standing alone, would be a career achievement for anybody but Andy. But for him, they seem to be only, and this is a hopeful statement, they seem to be only coming attractions. There's a natural tendency to look for a unifying theme, to ask what draws all of Andy's achievements together. I think what unites both of Andy's careers and all of his achievements is a knowing and fierce commitment to this country and what makes it great. I don't know of anyone who is better described as a freedom fighter than Andy McCarthy.
Boy, well, that's humbling beyond words. It's one of the great joys of my life, professional life and personal life, to have been able to represent the government before Michael Mukasey, who, for good reason, was reputed to be the best district judge in the United States when we had the good fortune to have that case in front of him. But it's been, it's even more mind-blowingly beyond my way to describe it, to have somebody who I admired and learned so much from to be someone who I can call my friend. And I thank Judge Mukasey for his, not only his support, but his friendship, which means more to me than I can say. And I'd also express my gratitude tonight for the friendship of David, who I've gotten to know so well over the years. We usually, when we exchange emails, we refer to each other as bro, which may have started out as something that was sort of just familiar, but has actually over the years become something that's affectionate and as much a term of respect and great reverence for the work that he does. And I come to feel the same way. I don't know Rob as well and haven't known him as long, but the commitment that they have to what they do and the importance of it is beyond, really beyond our ability to describe in terms of how significant it is. I wrote a column a couple of weeks ago about a gun case, and the Second Amendment issue had come up, and somebody asked, why do we always have such problems in Second Amendment cases? Why is the Second Amendment so hard when we have these other freedoms that seem to be sacrosanct, and yet we're always fighting over gun rights? And maybe as is my wont, I tried to cut to the chase and say, I think the reason we have such a problem is that we're a little bit embarrassed about why we have Second Amendment rights. And the fact of the matter is that if you look at the history of gun rights in America, what you find is that the framers thought it was extremely important for the states in the militias as well as ordinary citizens to be armed. And the reason they thought it was important was because an armed citizenry and armed state militias would be an important check on a tyrannical federal government, which they were extremely worried about. And nowadays, it kind of embarrasses people, I think, to say that, gee, we could be shooting it out with the U.S. Army in the streets, which is sort of the bottom line of what they were saying. But to take it away from guns for a moment and to move it into a bigger plane, we have the good fortune, the unbelievable fortune, to live in a country where we as citizens are actually armed against our government, not necessarily with firearms, but with our Constitution, with our rights. What the Constitution was meant to be was the citizens' protection against an adhesive, oppressive government. But as we all know, and as our common sense tells us, rights don't go out and defend themselves. They need champions. And what the American Freedom Law Center has been is the champion of individual rights, of liberty, which is what the Constitution was meant to safeguard and which is really what America is all about. So it's a great honor to be here this evening, but it's even a greater honor to be associated with the work that Rob and David do. It's the most important work in the United States, and in a time of oppressive government, we have no greater champions of liberty. Thank you very much.